Being in Sarajevo is I call it surrealistic because your mind can't grasp everything that's going on around you. You start questioning, is this real? Is this the way things are really, is this what we're really doing? Is this what we have to do? And then you walk in home and it's like, nothing's changed. It's all the same here. Like, why is everybody oblivious? What's wrong? You become very angry that no one knows, that no one's helping, that no one understands. I wasn't a very nice person to be around. It was, I think, a huge level of frustration that I wasn't able to do better, that I wasn't able to fix things. I was frustrated and angry at the world.
Before Bosnia, he was caring, nurturing, listened very well. What I noticed the most when he came home was that myself and the children, we weren't a priority anymore.
Patrick Dornan was just 7 years old when his father returned from his first tour in Bosnia.
I just remember the change in my father from the day that he left, so excited, and then he came back and he was just disconnected. You know, it was almost like you took a piece out of the puzzle. Probably the most vivid memory, I guess, for me was, you know, when they got in an argument and my mom finally put her foot down and said, you know, why don't you just go back? And for me, that was hard to hear. My dad has always been my hero growing up, and to hear that my mom doesn't even want him to stay home. It hurt a lot.
I wasn't functioning well at home, either with the kids or with Roseanne. I went to my boss at the time. Really, the only thing we can do is send you back.
I understood he had to go back. And I needed to be supportive of that.
While Steve wanted to return and make a difference, the people of the former Yugoslavia sought refuge, some charting a path to Canada.
I knew I had to leave. I was 22, I just had to leave. And it took me about 14 days to find out a way to leave.
We started kind of saying, like, now it's a good time, let's get somewhere. I got a paper which was passport for foreigners, that's how they call it, issued by Serbian authorities.
My husband had one person in Canada, in Winnipeg, and that's why we asked to go to Winnipeg. He did say, you know, there are like warmer places, but we say we don't care.
I was working in a church, and my wife was screaming, I remember, and, you know, a son was running, you know, in front of her screaming, saying, oh, we got a letter, we're going to Canada. So we had a little interview in the meantime, of course, and they asked us where we were going to go. And I said, I don't know, I didn't really think, I just said Vancouver. And the reason why, I think, because I was afraid of Canadian winter. So it's the first thing came to my mind, Vancouver, like it's hot there. She comes back and she said, we're going to Halifax. So I said, what part of Canada is that? Oh, come on, don't be picky, we're going to Halifax.
You know, we were young, we wanted to live in a normal country where we can prosper. And thinking about all the countries, Canada seemed like a good choice.
More than 4 years of fighting ended in the fall of 1995, when the leaders of Bosnia, Serbia, and Croatia signed the Dayton Peace Accord, bringing NATO troops in to replace the UN peacekeepers. Steve Dornan returned to Bosnia with a new mission. NATO's Implementation Force, or IFOR, was there to impose peace and new divisions of territory, something the UN didn't have in its mandate.
Forget everything you ever learned about the UN. That is all gone. We are now the stick. We are the green hats. We are here to impose equally on all factions our will for them to stop fighting.
After the Dayton Peace Accord, when war stopped, while obviously help was needed to enforce the peace agreement.
So in effect, NATO was the peacekeeper and the peacemaker. When we went back with I-4, the intervention force, we were very much the stick. We have complete freedom of movement throughout the country. There are no more checkpoints. Now we could affect change. We had the mandate, we had the will, and we had the firepower to affect change.
'97 was a little bit different. We were under NATO, and if you feel that you were threatened, a weapon was pointed at you, you could engage. That was the big difference under NATO compared to United Nations.
So more of a peacemaking, a little better rules of engagement, a little better position to operate from.
I saw the country in its worst in the UN days, where people died left, right, and center. In I-4, the only people that doing the dying were the people that, like the snipers that wouldn't give it up.
After years of war, one of the most horrific tasks was to locate and protect mass graves.
Any grave with more than 3 bodies in it is a mass grave, right? The whole country's a mass grave, for G's sakes. That's the context that you start with. So we knew that existed. Did we know the extent to which some of the genocide-sized mass graves? No.
One of the largest mass graves was found in Bihać. Canadian Dan McIntyre was there as the bodies of nearly 300 people were pulled from the earth.
It was quite surreal. For me, I've never seen anything like that before. And families are coming to try to identify articles of clothing. So we're supplying security at first to make sure nobody gets at the site until everything's excavated, and they had a medical examiner there trying to go through everything. As they started to excavate and pull the bodies out, and they found more and more as they went down. Yeah.
I-4 brought long-awaited peace. Because it was so effective, some might ask, why didn't NATO go in sooner?
The war to be independent has lost its luster. People are tired. Soldiers are tired. You do that for years, soldiers get tired. They don't want to do this anymore. The will of the people is, we don't want to do this anymore. So when NATO comes in and says, all right, we're at the point now where we can actually affect change because the sides don't want to fight anymore. That's when you can affect change. If we'd have gone in earlier, you'd have been fighting an occupation force war.
I-4's mandate ended after 1 year, and NATO transitioned to the Stabilization Force, or S4.
It was an interesting tour, my second tour. Believe it or not, it was a little more lax than '97. So things started to die down. There wasn't as much animosity. There weren't as many, incidents of violence and stuff like that.
Finally free from the stresses of constant danger, both soldiers and civilians were relieved. But the landscape of the region was also a casualty of the war. Canadian soldiers were astounded by the devastation.
They got blown to shit. Didn't matter what side they was on or who they supported, the towns got leveled.
It was just like nothing you ever seen in Canada before.
There's a lot of destruction throughout Yugoslavia.
In most of the areas that I traveled to in and around Bosnia, they had started kind of rebuilding infrastructure and depending on the areas at that point, but you could still see a lot of damage.
Canada's involvement officially ended in 2004. Just like the former Yugoslavia, peacekeepers were devastated, and no one knew how to handle the crisis.
I never told that story to anyone.
Confronting the effects of the traumas they had faced in war.
You'll hit a trigger, start sweating.
Drank a lot, I stayed in a lot.
It was this anger that worried me.
Because of the dreams, I wasn't sleeping.
Because we really didn't know, what we were dealing with. And our existing categories are how we generally approach, military mental health didn't fit. So we had very little experience with it. I mean, I think we were pretty nervous about it. These days, it's more about emotional shutdown, it's about anger, it's about not being able to sleep, obsessing about things.
Over time, those feelings started to come out. I would get very angry, I would kick things, I would punch things.
I was not getting the treatment I was asking, and I was not getting it.
Everything comes rushing back to you, your heart rate goes up, you're right back where you were when the incidents occurred. If PTSD rips your career away from you, you have that whole separation thing then. Because the people that are still back there, manning the post, are still there. And you think you should be there with them. So you feel ashamed, embarrassed, almost like you're an insult to them because you fell ill.
We had a really upset group of people who were unfortunately attempting to kill themselves and were killing themselves. They were in serious problems with alcohol, drug use to try to calm down, to try to manage themselves. Trying to reclaim, I think, their identity, to reestablish themselves as solid soldiers.
While the government and medical community struggled to catch up with the realities of PTSD, families were left to pick up the slack.
Vince was a mellow guy, easygoing, relaxed, fun to be with. He wasn't on any prescriptions, didn't take anything, no problems whatsoever. But when he came back, it's totally different.
The way you see the world changes, which affects your family dynamic, affects the way you raise your kids, affects everything.
Part of getting better is you have to make yourself better, and then before you can move on and see the impact that it's had. One of the things that got me through dealing with all that was knowing that she was there for me. A lot of veterans didn't have that. The wives just gave up. Not because they didn't love the person anymore, it's just he wasn't the same person and they just couldn't live with that person, the new person he became, and didn't see him getting better. When you're in it, you don't know, right? She sees it from the outside, she saw all of it. You realize the impact, the experiences that you had affected not only your life, but your family's lives.
It was a total disconnect at first from my kids, because if they were arguing over a hairbrush, I would lose my temper because I just couldn't get it. There's bigger things in life I would try to get through to them than what you're fighting over right now.
It's taken a lot of things from me, my family. My mom and dad were not close just because I can't anymore, right? Took my wife away from me. My work, I'm just now starting to become Vince Rigby again. It's going to take a long time, but I'm starting to get happy a little more.
After the war, after all of this, we have so many people with post-traumatic syndrome because of that. You think that you went and you actually survived, right? War and everything, and you think that you're okay. But later on you will find yourself, that there's so many things that's wrong with you.